Hi, I'm Mike Haduck, and today I'm going to talk about my music experience. I had my masonry experience, and I got my YouTube experience. I had my Navy experience, my real estate experience, my traveling experiences, union experiences, sailboat experiences, on. And today I'm going to talk about my music experiences. This is the first record I ever made. It was Ghost Riders in the Sky was one of them, and on the back I had Times and the Ballad of Mo Reap. And in my music experience, I did have a deal in Nashville, but it was for Europe, and I did play in the Great Wall of China with a band, and bands would call me up to see if I wanted to join. But I started out playing guitar, lead guitar and banjo. First it was bass, but it was lead guitar and banjo, Sunrise Junction. I played in that for a couple years. Then I went into singles and duos. I used to do that. That was pretty good. And then I would go out and play with a three-piece, me, my cousin, and a drummer. We did that. I did places like Split Rock Lodge up in the Poconos, and I did places like Mount Airy Lodge, which is a casino now. I played it when it was a casino and before it was a casino. And then after that, I joined a group called the Cadillacs. There was a guy in the Cadillacs, the bass player. His name was Gene Guerrilla, and he played with the Boston Celtics. And everywhere we go, we'd have a crowd. And that lasted, I think 7 years. And then I got off of that, and I was back into doing some singles and duos. But I still had my business. I still had my masonry business. So I really couldn't go 100%. Sometimes I felt like it, but couldn't go 100%. There was more money in the masonry business, and I had employees, and I had responsibilities, and my dad, and, working with my brother. It was a family business. So I had to keep that going. So after that, I did pretty good with my record, because at this time they could put them in jukeboxes. And I got, kind of known regionally, and all the way up through the Poconos, the tri-state area, New Jersey, New York, along the Delaware River. And this was all before the drunk driving laws. Before the drunk driving laws, you could play 7 nights a week, and twice on Saturdays if you wanted to, sometimes twice on Sundays. And you made good money for back then. I had this song though, Mo Reap, and it got some airplay, and I was known regionally. And then I got in contact with this lawyer down in Nashville, and I sent him my tapes. And I've had some, offers, but I didn't see anything that was worthwhile. He called me up. He says, listen, you got some really good songs. He says, but your recordings are lousy. He said, they're not professional. And he said, you're old-fashioned. He said, people nowadays are into the new kind of music. Your stuff ain't going to go. But I have a label over in Europe. And what we could do is you come down, record songs. That's just when CDs were coming out. That's actually one of the CDs. I still have one left. And we'll send it over to Europe and see what happens. This is all before the internet, 1994, 1995. So I fly down to Nashville, go into the recording studio. Trisha Yearwood was in the other studio, guy from the Mavericks at the time. We went in, recorded 8 songs in one day. Bang. Guys are coming off the bus, doing their parts. They come, they leave, and it was a fast production, but it was pretty good. And I did the picture. We had a professional picture taken, but it was lousy. So I told my sister, I said, come on, let's go up in the woods. And we took that picture, and I'm still using it today. And I did 8 songs, and that's when CDs were first coming out, and over in Europe it was a slim pack. So we send it over. At that time, everything was by mail, and everything. He calls me up 2 months later, says, Mike, I got good news and bad news. He says, what's the good news? He says, you're doing great up in Scandinavia. I said, well, like, what's the bad news? He says, I'm going to jail for real estate fraud. So I says, well, what do I do in Nashville now? And I was supposed to do the Grand Ole Opry. I was supposed to go on the gospel one and all that. And he says, well, nobody wants to deal with me right now. And he said, I got a label up in Canada. And I said, well, let me think about it. In the meantime, I get a call from Denmark. The guy's name was Dan Hansen. He said, listen, I'm a head of the DJ Association, representing 60 radio stations, and we're playing your CD. Would you like to come over and tour? And I said, well, let me think about it, and I'll call you back. I remember calling my cousin up from New York City because I played in New York City. And he said, yeah, go for it, man. Over there, they're big into the country. So I called him back and said, yeah, I could come over in November. I told him I'm a bricklayer, I'm a mason. He says, I'll come over. He says, okay, send me your ticket proving that you're coming, and I'll get you all this work. So I figured I have nothing to lose. So it was like the end of October. I was off anyway. And so I fly over to Denmark. You know, there's Denmark, there's Sweden, there's Norway. And I get in there. He was kind of a little bit disabled, had a stroke previously, and he was up in his 60s at the time. And his girlfriend was even a little older. So we went back to their apartment. I had my own room. And he gives me a note, says, you're going on television tomorrow. And I said, well, okay. So we show up at the television station the next day. And I go on television, and it was like a hee-haw set. You know, and they interviewed you, and then you got up and you played 4 songs. They put the record in the background, and you lip sync. And I did all that. And a little side story, there was this Danish girl, Swedish girl, you know, the blonde girls with the boots and the buckles. And I said to her, listen, I said, I'm over here and my promoter's a little bit disabled. Could you take me and show me around? Sure. So we went nightclubbing, you know, Copenhagen, all the places we were going to, highfalutin I call them. And we were driving home, and she's taking me home for tea. And she's got the Danish house, you know, with the thatched roof in a little village. And we turned the radio on, and guess who was on the radio? Me. So I'm saying, man, there is a God, you know. And there's a side story to that I'll tell you later. But anyway, I went around to the radio stations, and I'd play at the radio station, and they interview me, and then they'd say, well, Mike Haduck will be down here at the local pub, and he's going to play some songs. So I'd go down there, you know, and they'd have the microphone and everything ready, and I'd play my songs, and then I'd sell my records, and then I had a picture, you know, it's pretty much the same picture, you know, and then I'd autograph the picture, and people would buy it, you know, I was doing pretty good. And then a couple weeks after that, the television show came out, and it came out, and all of a sudden the phone's ringing. We want to meet Mike Haduck. So, okay, you know, they're all coming to the apartment, you know, and we're drinking coffee and tea and whatever, and all these people, like the Swedish girls were going, I want to come to America and sing. I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on. And it's just a little sidetrack of the music business, but what happened was the guy before me, who was on the show before me, he was a regular Denmark guy, and he went over to Nashville, and they filmed him. They filmed him walking up and down the streets and shaking hands to people. And he went on Nashville Now, which is the show then, and he had 3 minutes, and he sang a country song. And they aired that over in Denmark, so everybody in Denmark thinks he's a big star in the United States. And they're coming to me going, how do I come to America to sing? And I'm thinking, geez, I don't know if I could go down to Nashville now and get on the show and sing. I go over there, I did all the shows, and oh, Mike, this is great, you know, when you're going to come back? So I don't know, well, I get on the plane, and I come back, and then they said to me, well, you know, I didn't have the Nashville connection no more, and, you know, I had the business going, and they said, well, when are you going to come out with your next CD? So I went down to a local studio because I didn't know what to do, and I did this one, like Haduck, 20 favorites. And I added another 12 songs on that I had pre-recorded, and it was a good studio. And I sent it over, and they fixed me up with the Silkeborg Festival and a guy by the name of Eddie Rivers. Eddie Rivers was back in the 80s. He was on Billboard over here, and then he was real big over there. He was with Bear Records. So they fixed me up with him and David John Williams. So we go over there and we do the tour. And to me, it was like when disco ended, it just fell off the cliff. It just didn't seem like everybody was interested in the country scene anymore. So I did okay over there. You do a show like that, it was like $3,000. And then you'd go and you do your other shows. It might be $300 or $400. You do a couple hours here. You still do the radio station thing. You still sell your records. It was good, but it was kind of disappointing. It wasn't like, I almost thought, maybe I'm making it. It just didn't seem like there was a future in it. So I came back home, and that's when I started getting into the sailboat thing. Well, after that, years later, I keep going, and I'm sending my records over. I did this one, the Western album, and I did all them old Western songs, everything from El Paso to Old Susanna, Old Mexico, Red River Valley. I did all that. And I'd send that over, and then I go over again and do the radio shows, nothing big. Then I did a gospel CD. That was my gospel CD. And I was at the point, I weren't going to get them made professionally anymore because CDs were going out. It was that time. And then I had some I never finished. That's one I never finished. I was going to do like a rockabilly one. So every time I take a tour to Denmark or Sweden, the promoter usually hooked me up with another guy from Nashville, Dean Holman. I went with him a couple times, and then we'd meet up with some Danish stars and we'd play with them. So that's it for Denmark and Sweden. Now I'll talk a little bit about China. Then my sister had this doctor, and she came to see me. She was a Chinese doctor. And she watched me play and said, "Do you want to go to China and play on the Great Wall?" Well, I was in the Navy, and I'd been to Hong Kong before. And I said, "I'll think about it." And I said, I can't let that opportunity go. So I joined that band. I was over there for 2 weeks. And we did like Beijing, and then we went up into the hills and down near Vietnam. And we did this big convention when we were over there, and like a nightclub thing. And then I came back, and I've been like dilly-dallying. So what am I doing in music now? I am down in Florida, and on Friday nights I usually go down to LaBelle in Florida. It's a VFW on a Friday night, and it's only in the wintertime. The northern winter time. And if I'm going to play there, I will put the phone number and the address in the description box. And if you ever want to come and see me, I just kind of keep it up. I play my old Gretsch guitars and the banjo, and I play the fiddle. And I've had opportunities in it, but I like to go with a sure thing. Masonry was a sure thing. There was some times that it gets slow, and I did everything from bartending to real estate, owning apartments, all that kind of thing. So that's my music experience. Not a big deal, but it sure was fun. I remember when the Beatles hit in 1964, and I was in grade school yet, and all the girls said, "Oh, the Beatles are going to be on Ed Sullivan tonight," and I turned it on. And there's all these girls screaming, guys are playing guitar. My dad went and turned it off on me. My dad hated me playing guitar. And I never considered myself a great musician, but like I said, if the cash register's ringing, you're doing good. So before I end, I told you I was going to tell you about the girl from Denmark. Well, she was my age and I was her age, and neither of us ever got married. So every time I went over there about 6-7 times. You know, we'd meet up, and sometimes it was just for dinner. You know, sometimes she didn't have a boyfriend, I didn't have a girlfriend. We spend a couple weeks together, and I really liked her. And because of my commitments back home, and her father and mother was way up in age, but just before I met the girlfriend I have now, I was really considering on going over and staying there. And then she sent me a little message one day, you know, texting, "Mike, I have to go to the hospital, something's wrong, but I'm sure I could beat it." And I never heard from her again. And then her obituary came up, and so I moved to Florida, and that was the end of that. So thanks for watching my music experience video. And last band I played with up in Pennsylvania was called the Hometown Boys, B-O-Y-Z. And a lot of videos I did are under that name. And I'm going to leave a playlist of a bunch of videos I did and my tours to Sweden and China. I'll put it in the description box. And if I'm playing anywhere, I'll put it in the description box, the phone number, the leader of that band I'm playing with. Sometimes it's just a talent night. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike Haduck. I'll see you next video. This here's my brand new song. I'm at the Great Wall of China. It's about being loved and left. It's called like this. You done tore my heart out and you stomped that sucker flat. I don't know when you're coming home. I don't know where you're at. You know I love you, darling. What's this man to do? The chores they are a piling. Where the hell are you? Oh, you done learned that two-step.
完了吗？你快点儿！照相嘛，就不录像。不录像，快点。好了，您这位先生后边那个车可以离开。哎，1、2、3，1、2、3。等会儿啊，等会儿。1、2、3。
You done tore my heart out.
唱完了再唱。
The barn needs a paint in it. Pigs and eels swamped in it. I don't know when you're coming home. I don't know where you're at. You done tore my heart out and you stomped that sucker flat.
来来来，快来！先照，先照。快！
You know I love you, darling. You know I love you so. Down at other end. Hey, 1、2、3。